A dedicated park ranger vanished without a trace while rescuing an injured deer deep in the forest, leaving his colleagues searching desperately through the wilderness. But 48 hours later, an eagle begins circling the exact same spot for hours on end, refusing to leave despite the approaching storm. When the search team finally investigates what the eagle is trying to show them, what they discover makes their blood run cold and reveals a truth that no one could have imagined. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from what part of the world you're watching, because now I'm going to tell you how all of this happened. Mark Thornton's weathered hands traced the fresh elk tracks in the mud as his 8-year-old daughter Emma watched intently beside him. The morning sunlight filtered through the pine canopy, casting dappled shadows across their faces as they crouched low to the forest floor. See how the right hoof print is slightly deeper? That tells us which direction they're heading, he explained, his eyes crinkling at the corners when she nodded enthusiastically. At 42, Mark had become something of a legend among the Yellowstone National Park ranger community. 15 years of dedicated service had earned him the reputation as the park's most knowledgeable wildlife specialist. Emma adjusted her junior ranger hat, a treasured gift from her father on her 7th birthday. "Dad, can we check on the bald eagle nest today?" she asked, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Good idea, sweetheart. They should have fledglings by now," Mark replied, making a notation in his small field journal, another habit that his colleagues often teased him about. While other rangers had switched to digital apps, Mark maintained that nothing beat pencil on paper when you're 7 miles from the nearest power outlet. These Sunday excursions had become sacred rituals for them both. Every third weekend, regardless of weather, Mark took Emma into the wilderness, teaching her to identify bird calls and animal signs, nurturing her already blossoming love for nature. Back at their modest home on the outskirts of West Yellowstone, Sarah would pack them sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, thermoses of hot chocolate, and always include a note reminding them both to be home before dark. 3 days later, Tuesday morning began like any ordinary day. Mark kissed Sarah goodbye at 5:30 in the morning, grabbed his travel mug of coffee, and headed out in his forest green Park Service truck. The familiar sound of the engine faded as Sarah watched from the kitchen window, a routine so established she could almost set her watch by it. At 10:17 that morning, Mark radioed in to dispatch about an injured deer spotted by hikers near Obsidian Creek, approximately 7 miles from the nearest access road. "Female, appears to have a severely wounded front leg, possibly from a predator attack." Mark's voice crackled through the radio to dispatcher Jenny Whitaker. "Weather system's moving in, but I can reach her and assess before it hits. Should be back by late afternoon." "Roger that, Mark. Weather Service upgraded the forecast. Storm might come in faster than expected." "Maybe wait for backup?" Jenny suggested, concern evident in her voice. "Negative. If she's injured that badly, predators will find her soon. I'm already at Whitewater Trailhead. I'll hike in and out before the weather turns. Thornton out." That was the last routine communication from Ranger Mark Thornton. At 1:45 in the afternoon, a brief, staticky transmission came through. "Something's not right with this," before cutting off completely. Sarah's first indication something was wrong came at 7:30 that evening, when Mark hadn't called to say he was running late, something he always did, without fail. By 8:45, she'd called the ranger station twice, each time being assured that delays happened frequently, especially with wildlife rescue situations. When midnight came and went, Sarah loaded a sleepy Emma into the car and drove to the station herself. His GPS tracker stopped transmitting at 1:50 in the afternoon, Chief Ranger Bill Harrison explained, pointing to a topographical map where a small red dot marked Mark's last known position. "We've tried radio contact every 15 minutes with no response. The storms made it impossible to get anyone up there tonight." By dawn, Park Service had initiated a formal search operation. Mark's truck was found perfectly parked at Whitewater Trailhead, his backpack still inside containing his lunch, untouched. His emergency kit was missing, suggesting he'd taken it with him. He wouldn't just wander off, Sarah insisted to the gathering of rangers preparing to head out. something happened. Mark knows that terrain better than anyone. As the first week drew to a close, search teams had covered less than 60% of the potential area, hampered by the lingering snow and difficult terrain. On the 8th night, staring at the ceiling of the bedroom she shared with Mark, Sarah listened to the sound of Emma crying softly in her sleep down the hall. "We're considering all possibilities," Sheriff Tom McAllister told Sarah in their kitchen the next morning, his voice carefully measured. "Mark's an experienced outdoorsman, but we need to account for potential animal encounters, sudden medical emergencies, or what?" Sarah demanded, her hands gripping her coffee mug tightly. "We found what might be a hunter's blind about a half-mile from Mark's last transmission. It's not hunting season, and it was in a restricted area." The implication hung heavy in the air. Mark might have encountered poachers, people who would see a park ranger as a threat to their illegal activities. Sarah's mind raced with terrifying possibilities as she stared at Sheriff McAllister, suddenly unable to form words. 2 weeks after Mark's disappearance, the official search operation had been significantly scaled back. Only one Park Service helicopter continued daily reconnaissance flights, and the ground teams had been reduced to 4 rangers and volunteer search and rescue personnel who rotated shifts. Sarah sat in the Incident Command Center, now relocated from the main ranger station to a small conference room, staring at the map covered with color-coded grids indicating searched areas. Pins marked potential sightings and points of interest, none of which had yielded any sign of Mark. "We've covered over 80 square miles," Incident Commander Patricia Reeves explained, her voice betraying the fatigue of someone who hadn't slept properly in days. "The problem is, if Mark went off trail for the injured deer, he could be anywhere in this section." Her fingers circled a vast expanse of wilderness. Sarah nodded mechanically, having heard variations of this explanation repeatedly. The initial urgency had given way to a methodical, plodding search that seemed to move forward at an excruciating pace. Outside the command center, the media presence had dwindled to a single local reporter who periodically checked in for updates. National attention had shifted elsewhere after the first week. The story of a missing park ranger no longer novel enough to warrant coverage. At home, a routine of sorts had emerged. Sarah's mother had moved in temporarily to help care for Emma, who had returned to school but remained withdrawn and silent, except when asking questions about her father. Sarah continued working part-time at the veterinary clinic, finding that immersing herself in caring for animals provided momentary escapes from the constant anxiety. "They're not looking hard enough," Sarah confided to her friend Lisa one evening. "It's like they've already decided he's gone." "That's not true," Lisa replied gently. "I spoke with Bill yesterday. They're still searching every day. With half the resources, if Mark were some tourist from New York, they'd have the National Guard out there." Sarah's frustration boiled over, the first real emotion she'd shown in days. On day 17, a jurisdictional dispute erupted between Park Service and county authorities when evidence of the potential poaching operation was discovered. The sheriff's department wanted to treat the area as a potential crime scene, while Park Service officials argued that preserving it would further delay the search in that sector. "We don't have evidence connecting these poachers to Mark's disappearance," Chief Ranger Harrison told Sarah when she demanded to know why the search had been temporarily halted in that zone. "We can't afford to lose precious time on speculation." At the 3-week mark, Sarah took a desperate step. Against the advice of both law enforcement and friends, she organized a volunteer civilian search party, recruiting hikers, off-duty firefighters, and local outdoorsmen familiar with the terrain. The effort created a media resurgence, but also chaos in coordination, with untrained searchers sometimes requiring rescue themselves. Emma's 9th birthday passed with a subdued celebration at home. She blew out her candles with a solemnity that broke Sarah's heart, later confessing she had wished for her father to come home. "Mom, do you think Dad is cold out there?" Emma asked that night as Sarah tucked her in. "No, sweetheart," Sarah replied, fighting back tears. "Dad knows exactly how to stay warm in the wilderness. Remember how he taught you to build that emergency shelter last summer?" It was on the 31st day that veteran helicopter pilot Liz Rodriguez reported something unusual during her routine surveillance flight. "There's a mature bald eagle that's been circling the same area for the past 3 days," she explained, pointing to a location on the map approximately 2 miles from where Mark's radio signal had last pinged. "I wouldn't normally mention it, but it's such persistent behavior. The bird flies in the same pattern, then lands on the same tree, then repeats." Chief Ranger Harrison's interest was immediately piqued. Mark was working on the Eagle Conservation Project. He's documented unusual behaviors before. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a spark of genuine hope. As she hung up the phone, Emma appeared in the doorway, Mark's spare ranger hat still firmly on her head. "Mom, Dad always said to watch the birds," she said quietly. "He said they see everything." The next morning, the specialized search team reached the area identified by the circling eagle. This remote section of Yellowstone was characterized by steep ravines and dense undergrowth that had made previous search efforts particularly challenging. The terrain was treacherous enough that even experienced rangers proceeded with extreme caution, their boots slipping occasionally on the still melting snow patches. "There's something down there," called out Ranger Mike Delgado, peering over the edge of a narrow crevice nearly hidden by a snowdrift. "I can see what looks like fabric." The team's medic, Jeanette Crawford, secured herself to a safety line and carefully descended into the 30-foot crevice. The radio crackled with static before her voice came through, strained but clear. "He's here. Mark is here. And he's alive." Sarah collapsed into a chair when the call came through to the command center. After 5 weeks of emotional purgatory, the news was almost too overwhelming to process. Mark had been found severely injured but alive, having fallen into a crevice where he'd been trapped, unable to climb out with a broken leg and fractured ribs. The medical evacuation was complicated by the remote location and Mark's critical condition. Suffering from exposure, dehydration, and injuries that had begun to become infected, he was unconscious when finally airlifted to Bozeman Health Deaconess Hospital. "He's in critical but stable condition," Dr. Rebecca Winters explained to Sarah in the hospital waiting room. "The next 48 hours will be crucial. He's severely malnourished, and his body temperature was dangerously low when they found him. The fractures are concerning, but what's most worrying is the infection that's developed." As Mark fought for his life in the ICU, investigators pieced together what had happened based on the evidence at the scene and notes Mark had managed to scrawl in a small waterproof notebook found in his pocket. "It wasn't an injured deer," Sheriff McAllister explained to Sarah 2 days later. "It was a decoy, a sophisticated one with a mechanical component that simulated movement. We believe it was placed there deliberately to lure rangers away from a poaching operation targeting the elk herds in the northern section." The revelation sent shockwaves through the Park Service community. The idea that someone had deliberately targeted a ranger transformed what had been considered a tragic accident into something far more sinister. Mark's first coherent words, whispered to Sarah on day 40, confirmed the sheriff's theory. "Trap. They set a trap." As Mark's condition gradually stabilized, more disturbing details emerged. Forensic analysis of items recovered near the decoy site revealed sophisticated equipment used by professional poachers, including specialized tranquilizer guns and surgical tools for rapid harvesting of animal parts destined for black markets in Asia. "We've identified at least 3 incidents in the past year where rangers were called to remote areas for injured animals that weren't there when they arrived," Chief Ranger Harrison admitted during a briefing. "We assumed they were false reports or that predators had reached the animals first." Evidence suggested the poaching ring had been studying ranger patterns and responses, specifically targeting Mark because of his reputation for responding quickly and often alone to wildlife distress calls. His dedication to animal welfare had made him predictable and vulnerable. Mark's survival against all odds was attributed to his wilderness training and resourcefulness. His notebook revealed how he had managed to create a shelter within the crevice using his uniform jacket and emergency supplies, rationing his limited water and treating his broken leg with makeshift splints. The investigation took a dramatic turn when analysts discovered trail camera footage from a wildlife research project that had inadvertently captured images of two individuals setting up the deer decoy the day before Mark's disappearance. Though their faces were partially obscured, one man's distinctive tattoo was clearly visible. As Mark's recovery progressed slowly, Emma finally began speaking freely again, often sitting beside her father's hospital bed, telling him about school and the birds she'd spotted in the hospital garden. The eagle Liz Rodriguez had observed continued to be seen in the area where Mark had been found, soaring in wide circles as if standing guard. "That bird saved my life," Mark told Emma during one of his more lucid moments. "I could hear it calling every day. Somehow, I knew if I could just hold on long enough, someone would notice it." On day 52, Mark was strong enough to give his first formal statement to investigators. The details he provided painted a picture more complex and disturbing than anyone had anticipated. "I realized it was a decoy when I got within about 50 yards, he explained, his voice still weak. "The movement was too regular. When I stopped and pulled out my binoculars to get a better look, I heard someone behind me. Before I could turn around, I was running, and that's when I fell into the crevice. I think they assumed I was dead, or they would have come down to make sure." Mark's haunting words hung in the air, shifting the investigation into something far darker than anyone had initially suspected. In the sterile hospital room, his frail body connected to tubes and monitors, Sarah slept uncomfortably in a chair beside him, while a nurse quietly checked his vital signs. 3 months after Mark's rescue, a coordinated operation involving Park Service law enforcement, FBI, and wildlife officials across 3 states resulted in the arrest of 7 individuals connected to the poaching ring. Raymond Vickers and his partner, former hunting guide Scott Mercer, were apprehended at a storage facility in Idaho, where authorities discovered a cache of illegal hunting equipment, processed animal parts, and detailed records of their operation dating back nearly 5 years. They specifically selected rangers who worked alone and were known for responding quickly to wildlife distress calls. U.S. Attorney Caroline Bennett explained at a press conference announcing the indictments. Ranger Thornton wasn't their first target, but he was the first to survive their tactics. The investigation revealed a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had targeted not only Yellowstone, but Grand Teton, Olympic, and Rocky Mountain National Parks, generating millions in illegal profits from the sale of elk antlers, bear gallbladders, and other animal products to overseas buyers. Mark's recovery progressed steadily, though doctors warned he would likely always walk with a slight limp due to the severity of his leg fracture and the delay in proper medical treatment. Physical therapy became part of his daily routine, with Emma often accompanying him to sessions, counting his repetitions and offering encouragement. "One more, Dad. You can do it," she would call out, her faith in her father's strength unwavering despite his evident pain. 6 months after his rescue, Mark returned to limited duty at Yellowstone, working primarily on educational programs and conservation planning rather than field operations. His first day back was marked by a small ceremony where he was presented with a special commendation for survival and dedication to service. "I'm not the hero in this story," Mark told the gathered crowd of colleagues, friends, and family. "The real heroes are the search teams who never gave up, my wife who refused to accept that I was gone, and strangely enough, a bald eagle that somehow knew something wasn't right." The eagle, which Mark could now recognize by sight due to a distinctive pattern on its right wing, had become something of a local celebrity. Mark had named it Guardian and often pointed it out to visitors, while Emma proudly explained how the bird had saved her father's life, a story that became park legend. The criminal case against the poaching ring revealed connections to wildlife trafficking organizations in Vietnam, China, and Russia, ultimately leading to international arrests and the disruption of supply chains that had operated with impunity for decades. Evidence recovered from the suspects' computers and phones confirmed they had specifically targeted Mark after studying his patrol patterns and response habits for months. They knew exactly which rangers would come alone when an injured animal was reported, Agent Liu explained during a debriefing with Park Service Management. They exploited the very compassion that makes our rangers effective at their jobs. For the Thornton family, the process of healing extended beyond Mark's physical recovery. Emma had developed anxiety about her father leaving for work, often becoming distressed when he was late returning home. Sarah found herself unconsciously counting the hours when Mark was on duty, the habit of worry now deeply ingrained. "We're all different now," Sarah confided to her therapist during a family counseling session. "There's before the crevice and after the crevice. We're learning to live in the after part." On the one-year anniversary of Mark's rescue, the Thornton family returned to Yellowstone for a private ceremony. They hiked to a safe viewing area near where Mark had been found, Emma now confidently identifying bird calls and animal tracks along the way, just as her father had taught her. At a small clearing overlooking the valley, Mark set up a simple brass plaque he'd had made. "In gratitude to Guardian, who watches from above." As if on cue, the distinctive eagle appeared, soaring in wide circles above them. "Do you think he remembers you, Dad?" Emma asked, shielding her eyes from the sun as she tracked the bird's flight. "I think some connections transcend understanding," Mark replied, his arm around Sarah's shoulders. "Sometimes survival depends on being noticed by the right eyes at the right time." The case study of Mark Thornton's disappearance and rescue became required reading for park rangers nationwide, a sobering reminder of both the dangers they faced and the importance of protocols designed to protect them. The poaching ring's tactics revealed vulnerabilities in park operations that had gone unnoticed for years, leading to systemic changes across the National Park Service. 2 months after the anniversary ceremony, Sarah discovered something unexpected while organizing digital files on her laptop. A small icon appeared in her email inbox, a message from an unknown sender with only a subject line: "Ranger Thornton, not finished." When she clicked it open, her blood ran cold. The attachment contained a single image: Mark and Emma walking in the park from their Sunday hike 3 weeks before his disappearance, clearly taken by someone observing them from a distance. Sarah immediately contacted Agent Liu, who arrived at their home within the hour. The FBI technician accompanying her analyzed the email while Sarah paced anxiously in the living room. "It was sent through an anonymous remailer," the technician explained, his expression grim. "But they made a mistake using the same server twice. We can trace this." Mark, now walking with only a slight limp, studied the photograph with disturbing recognition. This was taken from the ridge above Osprey Point. Someone was watching us that day. He glanced toward Emma's room, lowering his voice. "Do you think they're still monitoring us?" Agent Liu didn't sugarcoat her response. "We have to consider that possibility. The ring we took down was extensive, but there were international connections we haven't fully mapped yet." That evening, after Emma was asleep, Sarah and Mark sat at their kitchen table, hands clasped tightly together. "Maybe we should consider moving somewhere new," Sarah suggested quietly. "Somewhere no one knows us." Mark's eyes drifted to the window, where the familiar silhouette of mountains defined the horizon. "This is our home, our life. I can't let them take that from us, too." The FBI established discreet surveillance around their property, with agents positioned in rotating shifts. Emma noticed the unfamiliar cars on her way to school the following morning, tugging at Sarah's sleeve. "Mom, that black car is following us again today." At the elementary school, Sarah watched as Emma walked through the doors, a plainclothes officer posing as a new teacher's aide following at a careful distance. The weight of constant vigilance was exhausting, but the alternative was unthinkable. Mark returned to his physical therapy sessions with renewed determination, pushing beyond the therapist's recommendations. "I need to be strong enough," he insisted when the therapist cautioned him about overexertion, "strong enough to protect my family." 1 week after the email, Raymond Vickers was found dead in his prison cell, an apparent suicide according to initial reports. Agent Liu arrived at the Thornton home with the news, her expression unreadable. "The timing concerns us," she admitted. "Someone may be tying up loose ends." That night, Emma woke screaming from a nightmare, and Mark rushed to her room faster than his healing leg should have allowed. "They were taking you away again," she sobbed into his shoulder. "Back to the cold place." The following day, Agent Liu presented a strategy that divided the investigation team. "We create a narrative that Mark recovered something from the crevice, something the poachers need back. We draw them out." "You want to use my husband as bait?" Sarah's voice trembled with barely controlled anger. "After everything he's been through?" Mark listened silently, weighing the proposal against their limited options. "If it ends this, if it keeps other rangers from being targeted, I need to consider it." That night, when the family Thornton finally slept in their secured home, Sarah's phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number, a single image of Mark and Emma walking in the park 3 weeks before his disappearance, a photo clearly taken by someone who had been watching them from afar, with a simple message below: "You really think you got all of us?" Sarah stared at her phone in horror, her hand trembling as she showed the message to Agent Liu, who immediately mobilized a team to secure the Thornton residence. Within minutes, FBI agents swept through the property, searching for surveillance devices, while others established a secure perimeter around the home. "We're moving you to a safe location immediately," Agent Liu instructed, her voice tense but controlled. "Pack only essentials. We leave in 15 minutes. Mark held Emma close as she watched wide-eyed while agents methodically examined their home. "It's okay, sweetheart. Remember how we practiced our adventure drill? This is just like that." The family was relocated to a nondescript FBI safe house 30 miles outside Yellowstone, where technical analysts began examining the threatening message. A specialized technician explained to Agent Liu, "The photo was sent through encrypted channels, but they made a crucial mistake by using the same device twice." Throughout the night, Mark paced the unfamiliar living room despite the pain in his leg, his ranger instincts pushing him to check windows and doors repeatedly. Sarah watched him with concern, recognizing the hypervigilance that had become part of their new normal. By morning, the investigation had identified the message's origin as a disposable phone purchased with cash in Idaho. Agent Liu presented a new file to the investigation team at their secure facility. Scott Mercer, former hunting guide with multiple wildlife violations, was spotted with Vickers in security footage 3 days before Mark's incident. Mark immediately recognized the man when shown his photograph. "He was there that day. I heard his voice right before I ran." Later that evening, Sarah and Mark sat at the kitchen table of their temporary refuge after Emma had finally fallen asleep. "Maybe we should consider moving somewhere completely new," Sarah suggested quietly. "Somewhere no one knows us." Mark gazed out the window at the unfamiliar landscape. "This is our home, Sarah, our community. I can't let them drive us away from the life we've built." The following day, a tense strategy meeting at FBI headquarters divided the investigation team. "We need to create a convincing narrative that Mark recovered something of value during his time in the crevice," proposed a senior agent. "Something that could identify their entire network." Sarah reacted with immediate fury. "You want to use my husband and daughter as bait? After everything we've already endured?" Mark listened silently, weighing their limited options before finally speaking. "If this is what it takes to end the threat and protect other rangers, I need to consider it." Under protest from Sarah, a carefully crafted story was leaked to local news sources suggesting Mark had documented critical evidence about the poaching operation before his disappearance. The FBI installed additional surveillance equipment around the Thornton home, preparing for their return under heavy security. 3 days later, the family cautiously moved back, surrounded by undercover agents positioned in neighboring houses and vehicles. Emma spotted the now familiar eagle circling above their home as they pulled into the driveway. "Guardian's back, Dad. She's still watching over you." Mark nodded solemnly, finding unexpected comfort in the bird's presence. "Some connections in nature run deeper than we understand." Throughout the night, hidden cameras captured images of an unmarked vehicle passing slowly by their house 3 separate times. Technical analysts worked to enhance the footage, identifying partial license plates that matched a vehicle registered to one of Mercer's known aliases. At dawn, Mark awoke suddenly, a ranger's instinct for danger pulling him from sleep. He moved silently to Emma's room, checking on her before carefully peering through her window at the tree line beyond their property. A subtle movement caught his attention, something that didn't belong among the natural patterns of the forest. The next morning, the undercover agent assigned to follow Emma to her school bus stop failed to appear at the designated time. When Sarah called the FBI in panic, she learned they had found him unconscious in his car a mile away. Racing to Emma's room, she found the window open, her daughter's junior ranger hat fallen to the floor, and a single note. An exchange. The girl for the evidence. Instructions will follow. Sarah's scream echoed through the Thornton house as FBI agents flooded through the front door, their weapons drawn. Agent Liu directed a team to secure the perimeter, while evidence technicians carefully collected the ransom note with sterile tweezers, preserving any fingerprints or DNA the kidnapper might have left behind. "We have a child abduction," Liu barked into her radio. "Activate the Amber Alert system immediately." 8-year-old Emma Thornton, last seen in her bedroom at approximately 5:30 this morning. Mark limped frantically into the room, his face ashen as he took in the open window and his daughter's fallen ranger hat. Despite his still-healing injuries, he pushed past 2 agents to scan the woods behind their property. "I'm joining the search," he insisted, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Nobody knows these woods like I do." Within an hour, the Thornton living room had transformed into a command center, filled with communication equipment, computers, and hastily assembled maps. Sarah sat rigidly on the couch, clutching Emma's stuffed eagle that normally resided on her bed, while agents and technical specialists worked around her. "Scott Mercer has a history of calculated revenge," a behavioral analyst explained to the assembled team. "This isn't impulsive. He's likely planned this as a contingency since the initial arrests." A text message alert chimed on Sarah's phone at precisely noon. Her hands trembled as she read aloud, "Obsidian Trail, noon tomorrow. Come alone with the pen drive. No devices, no tracking, no weapons, or you'll never see her again." Mark retreated to the garage, methodically gathering his survival kit. His hands shook slightly as he checked each item, but his ranger training had kicked in, providing structure amid the chaos of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "You can't seriously be considering going alone," Sarah whispered from the doorway, watching him prepare. "I don't have a choice," Mark replied, studying topographical maps of the Obsidian Trail area, his finger tracing potential ambush points and escape routes. "This is about Emma." A heated debate erupted in the living room command center as Agent Liu confronted the tactical team leader. "He's a park ranger, not a trained hostage negotiator. We can't send him in alone. And I'm telling you, if Mercer sees anyone else, he'll disappear with the girl," the tactical leader countered. "He knows these woods almost as well as Thornton." While sorting through Emma's school bag for recent photos to distribute to search teams, Sarah discovered her daughter's small field journal. Flipping through it, she found detailed drawings of birds, including the bald eagle Emma had named Guardian, along with careful notes about its flight patterns and behaviors. "Mark, look at this," Sarah called, pointing to Emma's meticulous observations. "She's been tracking Guardian, just like you taught her." A technical team prepared a sophisticated decoy pen drive containing tracking software designed to activate only hours after being connected to a computer. "It's programmed to remain dormant initially," Agent Liu explained. "He won't detect it until it's too late." At dawn the following day, Mark dressed in his full ranger uniform, a decision he explained to Sarah as she helped him button the shirt over his still-healing ribs. "Mercer needs to see me as the ranger who caught him. It's how he defines me." As Mark prepared to depart, the distinctive shadow of Guardian passed over the driveway. Mark paused, watching the eagle circle above their home. "Show me the way again," he whispered. The FBI tactical team provided Mark with the decoy pen drive and, against his protests, secretly sewed a tiny tracker into his uniform hem. "Just a precaution," Agent Liu insisted. "If things go south, we need to find you both." Mark set out alone for the meeting point as instructed, the weight of the situation evident in each careful step. 5 kilometers from the designated location, the FBI surveillance team, monitoring his progress, suddenly lost all signal from his tracker, and simultaneously, in the command center, Sarah's phone chimed with a new message, a photo of Emma next to today's newspaper with the words, "You broke the rules, now we have them both." The command center erupted into chaos as Agent Liu slammed her fist on the table. "We've lost both of them now. Deploy all available units to the last known coordinates." Sarah clutched her phone, the image of Emma's frightened face searing into her memory as teams scrambled to respond. In the air above Yellowstone, the Park Service helicopter equipped with thermal imaging technology scanned the dense forest below. "This is impossible," the operator muttered, frustration evident in his voice. "I'm getting dozens of heat signatures. Every elk and bear is showing up just like a human would." At the mobile command post hastily established near the Obsidian Trail, Sarah refused to sit idle. She spread Mark's detailed maps across a folding table, her veterinary training giving her a systematic approach despite her terror. "Mark always said to think like what you're tracking," she told Agent Liu, her finger tracing familiar patterns. "The eagle's nesting territories. He's documented all of them. He said Guardian's behavior was territorial." "What are you suggesting?" Agent Liu asked, studying Sarah's intense focus. "Mark wouldn't just wander blindly. He'd use landmarks he knows would be visible from above. And he'd head for water," Sarah replied, circling an area on the map. "This creek runs east from his last known position. He always teaches Emma that water means life and direction." The FBI divided their resources, sending teams to cover multiple possible routes while drones equipped with high-resolution cameras swept the terrain from above. "We've got movement at grid reference Charlie 6, a drone operator reported, something reflecting sunlight approximately 2 miles east of Thornton's last position. Miles away in a rustic hunting cabin, Mark regained consciousness slowly, careful to keep his eyes closed as he assessed his surroundings. The throbbing pain at the back of his head told him he'd been struck hard. He could hear muffled voices nearby and the distinctive sound of Emma's controlled breathing. The same pattern she used during their hide-and-seek games in the forest. She was alive and, judging by her breathing, alert. "I've got both of them secured," Scott Mercer spoke into a satellite phone, his voice low and controlled. "Yes, I confiscated the drive, but we need to verify it's the only copy. The buyer still wants the shipment in 48 hours. He paused, listening. "If they know about the operation, we'll have to accelerate everything." Mark risked opening his eyes slightly, catching Emma's gaze across the cabin. She sat in the corner, hands bound but posture alert, her expression carefully neutral as she noticed her father's consciousness. He gave an almost imperceptible nod, which she acknowledged by blinking twice, their trail signal for, "I understand." In the command helicopter, Agent Liu studied a pattern that the wildlife specialist had just pointed out. "That eagle is back," the specialist noted, indicating a bird circling consistently over one section of forest. "Same flight pattern as before." "Sarah mentioned something about that," Liu replied, radioing the ground teams. "Focus search efforts on Grid Echo 7. We have a potential point of interest." Inside the cabin, Mark engaged Mercer cautiously. "Your partners are going to sacrifice you the moment things get complicated," he said, his voice deliberately calm. "You know that's how these operations work." Mercer laughed coldly. "You Rangers think you understand everything about predators. Sometimes the prey thinks it's smarter than it is." Emma caught her father's subtle glance toward the small window where, beyond the glass, a familiar silhouette circled against the sky. Slowly, methodically, she began working her bound wrists against a rough edge of wood behind her, remembering her father's lessons about rope fibers and patience. As the FBI search teams converged on the coordinates identified by the eagle's circling pattern, Mercer's associate burst through the cabin door. There's a helicopter approaching from the south. We need to move now or abandon the shipment. While Mercer was distracted arguing with his partner, Emma finally freed her hands, making eye contact with Mark at the exact moment he subtly signaled their escape plan with the hand gestures they had developed during their Sunday hikes. 3 fingers followed by a closed fist. Wait for my signal, then run. The explosion ripped through the forest, lighting up the twilight sky with a blinding flash as a fireball erupted from the cabin. Sarah screamed in anguish, breaking free from the FBI agent's restraining grip as she lunged toward the inferno. 2 agents caught her, physically lifting her from the ground as she fought to reach the blazing structure where her husband and daughter had been moments before. Mark! Emma! Her voice tore through the chaos as firefighters and agents scrambled to establish a perimeter around the rapidly spreading flames. We need to get water on that structure now, Agent Liu shouted into her radio, her professional composure briefly fractured by the horrific scene unfolding before them. And get search teams around the perimeter. They could have escaped before detonation. What no one yet realized was that Mark had anticipated Mercer's contingency plan. Minutes before the explosion, he had spotted the detonator wires running along the cabin's interior wall, while Mercer and his associate argued about their escape route. With Emma freed from her restraints, Mark had signaled her toward a loose floorboard he had discovered earlier, a small cellar access used for storing supplies. Now, Mark had whispered urgently, and Emma had slipped through the narrow opening like a shadow. Mark followed, pulling the trapdoor closed just as Mercer triggered the remote detonator from a safe distance. The blast had thrown them against the cellar's dirt wall, debris raining down as the structure above disintegrated in flames. Mark had covered Emma with his body, absorbing the shock and falling timbers that broke through. "Stay low and follow me," Mark instructed as smoke began filling their refuge. They crawled through a drainage culvert barely wide enough for Mark's shoulders, emerging 50 yards from the cabin just as the roof collapsed completely. "Run!" Mark grabbed Emma's hand, pulling her toward a rock formation, as the secondary explosion sent a shockwave through the forest. They dropped to the ground behind solid granite, Mark covering Emma's small body with his own as debris rained down around them. From the command post, the scene appeared hopeless. Firefighters battled the blaze while search teams combed the perimeter, looking for any sign that Mark and Emma might have escaped. Sarah stood rigid with shock, unable to process the possibility that she had lost them both. In the forest, Emma's training with her father became their lifeline. "Dad, you're bleeding," she whispered, pointing to a gash on his forehead as they sheltered behind the rocks. "It's okay, sweetheart. Head wounds always bleed a lot," Mark replied, tearing a strip from his uniform shirt to create a makeshift bandage. "Do you remember what we do when we're lost?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Find water. Water means life and direction." Mark smiled despite their dire situation. "That's my girl. We need to move east toward the creek. They'll be looking for us, but so will Mercer if he survived." As twilight deepened into darkness, Mark and Emma made their way carefully through the forest, using natural cover and the survival techniques they had practiced during their Sunday hikes. Mark's re-injured leg slowed their progress, forcing them to stop frequently as he fought through waves of pain. At the search command post, a drone operator suddenly called out, "I've got movement at the eastern perimeter, 2 heat signatures moving away from the site." Agent Liu rushed to the monitor. "Can you confirm?" "It's not definitive. Could be wildlife," the operator replied, adjusting his equipment. "But wait, look at this." He pointed to the thermal image where the larger heat signature appeared to be limping, supporting the smaller one. Sarah pushed forward. "That's them." Mark's leg would slow them down. At that moment, the radio crackled with an excited voice. "Command, we've got something. The Eagle is back. It's circling directly above those heat signatures." While Mercer aponta sua arma para Mark, grito agudo de águia ecoa pelo cânion, momentaneamente distraindo o caçador ilegal. Naquele exato instante, Emma emerge corajosamente de seu esconderijo e empurra uma pedra solta que desencadeia uma pequena avalanche, enquanto, simultaneamente, o som distinto de helicópteros e vozes amplificadas anuncia a chegada das forças de resgate. Mas quem alcançará Mark primeiro? A bala de Mercer ou os agentes do FBI? The deafening screech of the eagle pierced the forest stillness, causing Mercer to instinctively look skyward. In that crucial moment of distraction, Emma sprang from her hiding place behind the rocks, pushing against a loose boulder with all her strength. The stone dislodged, triggering a cascade of smaller rocks that tumbled down the slope toward Mercer. Simultaneously, the unmistakable whoomp-whoomp of helicopter rotors filled the canyon, accompanied by amplified voices through megaphones. FBI, drop your weapons. Mercer recovered quickly, swinging his gun back toward Mark, but the first rocks had already struck his legs. As he stumbled, the FBI tactical team emerged from the tree line, weapons trained on the poacher. The agent in the lead fired a single shot, striking Mercer's shoulder, causing his gun to discharge harmlessly into the ground as he fell. "Dad!" Emma cried, rushing to Mark's side as agents swarmed the area, securing Mercer and searching for any additional threats. Sarah broke through the line of agents, running toward her family with tears streaming down her face. The three collapsed together, in an embrace, clutching each other as if afraid they might be separated again by some unseen force. 3 months later, U.S. Attorney Caroline Bennett stood before a bank of microphones at the Department of Justice. "Today, we announce the complete dismantling of one of the largest wildlife trafficking operations in North American history," she declared. The 7 individuals arrested in connection with this case were part of a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had targeted multiple national parks, generating millions in illegal profits from the sale of protected wildlife parts to overseas markets. Behind her, photographs displayed the extensive evidence recovered from storage facilities across 3 states: surgical equipment for harvesting animal parts, specialized weapons, and detailed financial records tracing back 5 years. In the Thornton home, Mark watched the press conference on television, his hand absently rubbing his leg where new scars had formed over the old. The physical therapy had progressed well, though doctors confirmed he would always carry a slight limp as a reminder of his ordeal. The individuals involved specifically targeted rangers who worked alone and responded quickly to wildlife distress calls, Bennett continued. Ranger Mark Thornton wasn't their first target, but he was the first to survive their tactics. 6 months after the confrontation at the canyon, Mark returned to Yellowstone in a new capacity, leading educational programs rather than solo patrols. The Park Service had implemented comprehensive changes to their response protocols, requiring rangers to work in pairs when investigating reports of injured wildlife in remote areas. On his first day back, colleagues organized a small ceremony where Superintendent Davis presented Mark with a special commendation for bravery and dedication to service. "I'm not the hero in this story," Mark told the gathered crowd, his voice steady but humble. "The real heroes are the search teams who never gave up, my wife who refused to accept that I was gone, and strangely enough, a bald eagle that somehow knew something wasn't right." Emma, now showing interest in bird conservation, had started a junior ranger project documenting raptor behaviors in the park. Her notebooks contained detailed observations of Guardian, whose distinctive wing pattern made the eagle easily identifiable as it continued to patrol the territory where Mark had been found. On the 1-year anniversary of Mark's rescue, the Thornton family hiked to a safe overlook near the crevice where he had spent those harrowing weeks. Emma confidently identified bird calls and animal tracks along the trail, her knowledge growing with each passing day. At the viewpoint, Mark carefully installed a simple brass plaque he'd commissioned. "In gratitude to Guardian, who watches from above." As if responding to its name, the eagle appeared overhead, circling majestically against the clear blue sky. "Do you think he remembers you, Dad?" Emma asked, shielding her eyes from the sun as she tracked the bird's flight. "I think some connections transcend understanding," Mark replied, his arm around Sarah's shoulders. Sometimes survival depends on being noticed by the right eyes at the right time.